All right, I want to make sure that everybody again understands what's going on. You just took the written test for Chapter 9. I'm flipping the order of these two. So I'm going to go over Chapter 10 right now. It should only take about 15 minutes. And then tomorrow will be the hands-on for Chapter 9 for the entire period. All right? And I know that some of you have told me either via email or in person that you're kind of struggling with Bootstrap. I can understand that. I can appreciate that. The best thing I could tell you, you know this already, is Bootstrap. GetBootstrap.com. It's got a lot of the answers. But one of the best ways to do this is to just go out and Google free Bootstrap templates and take a look at one. All right, because you might end up using that tomorrow for the test. All right, so tomorrow again, all period. Then Wednesday says complete labs for Chapter 10, plus you're going to get your next homework. All right, and that is the Chapter 10 homework. So you're going to have a lab Wednesday, you're going to have a lab Thursday, and then on Friday we're going to go over Chapter 11, plus we'll have the written test for Chapter 10. Okay, I don't think that's going to be that big a thing for you, but I will create a test review, and we'll go over that at the end of the day on Thursday. All right, so we'll do that. Take the test when you come in first thing on Friday, and then we'll go over Chapter 11. Please notice that next week you've also got a lab on Monday, you've got a lab on Tuesday. All right, and then there's, hopefully you consider this to be good news, I believe this is the last hands-on test for the first half of the class. All right, so that'll be the 28th. Then we go into Chapter 12, which we'll go over fairly quickly. And then notice you've got lab day, lab day, lab day, lab day, etc. So there's quite a bit of lab in there. And it says instructor-guided PSD to HTML. And let me say that the idea of PSD, what a PSD is, just so you know, it's a Photoshop source document. It's the PSD. All right? And you can open up PSD documents inside of GIMP, which was that package that I told you about before, but I'm not at all proficient with creating PSD files. All right, I've done a little work as far as converting them over, and we're going to talk about that stuff later on in the week. So hopefully by the time you start on the assignment, it won't be that foreign to you where it's not going to make any sense whatsoever. All right, so I'm going to jump into Chapter 10, which starts in your book on page 451. As you can see, it's entitled Web Development. And again, don't feel like sitting there and reading chapter objectives to you. But the idea is what they do in this chapter is they say, okay, you're going to work for a company. And at that company, these might be different jobs that you could have at that company. You're all smart enough to realize this, that for instance, let's say that you start up, so let's say that, everyone in here, you start up a company together, all right? The smaller the company, the greater the chance that you are going to be doing more than one of these jobs. That should make sense to you. The larger the company, the more specialized you're able to be. Now, some people like that, and they want to go to work for a big company so they can do one and only one thing. And they're very happy with that, and they can become very good, very proficient at that. Other people like the fact that when they come in and they work for a small company, every day is different. All right? And most people are somewhere in between. So again, we'll talk about what is involved with a successful website project, something that's called the SDLC, or the Systems Development Lifecycle. And again, we'll talk about some of the different jobs that you could have potentially if you worked in the field. All right, and that's what they start with. First, these project job roles. The chance of you going into a job, unless, again, it's a very small company, and having them hire you in and having you be a project manager are probably very remote, just because typically you need some experience because a project manager, not to be funny, manages the project. So they're in charge of everything that's involved in the project. And typically, that's a very hard thing to have somebody do when they're right out of school. Not saying that it's impossible. I'm not saying that you couldn't do it. All right. I remember when I got my, I had a 4-year degree, and I went back and got a 2-year degree. And then when I did, I got a job, a programming job at AT&T Bell Labs. But if they'd have put me in a position of authority there, I would have floundered at best and really done poorly at worst. All right. So again, the project manager, as it says, oversees the whole project. The information architect clarifies the missions and goals. When you look at some of these, for instance, like the information architect, it's like, okay, clarifies the missions and goals of the site. That doesn't sound like a full-time job. No, there's other things that they may do, and they may work in conjunction with some of these other people. All right, even a good project manager. I've worked with people that I consider to be good project managers, and I work with other people who I consider to be really poor project managers. And one of the best project managers I ever worked with was a guy that when I started at AT&T, he was leading the project. And I don't mean he was the project manager. Technically, he wasn't. He didn't have that title. He was another programmer. But he'd been there for many years, and he knew what was going on. All right. When AT&T broke up, it's funny, the number of people that I worked with that aren't there anymore. All right. This guy was smart. He got into a startup telecommunications company in Madison, Wisconsin. Now he's the vice president. And he goes all over the world giving speeches and stuff. Wish I made half of what he makes. All right. All right. The user experience designer, we've talked about this a little bit. UX is a really hot term right now. You might get a job as a user experience designer. And the idea is they want to make people comfortable when they come to a web page. And that's a combination of a lot of things, using a nice color scheme, using the right font, etc. It's a lot of different things. But again, really when you think about it today, websites in a lot of ways, they're kind of like department stores. And what I mean is, one department store has a big sale. It's not that uncommon that another department store that might be, in competition with them would also have a big sale. That kind of an idea. And it's the same kind of thing with websites. I've given you examples before. So if you say that you want to go out and you want to buy something, you want to buy some sporting goods, and you don't want to go to the store, or you want to buy a book or whatever it is, there's so many different places that you can go to that they're trying to not only hook you into the website, but keep you at the website. And that's part of the job of the user experience designer. A marketing rep, as it says, their job is to basically sell. Copyright and editor, it may not sound like that big a thing, but it's really important when you're using a website that it doesn't have spelling errors in it. All right, I don't know if you've ever gone out to a website that on the front, on their home page, they've got an error, and it's like they don't fix it, and they don't fix it, and they don't fix it. And it may not sound like a big thing, but they can have bad ramifications. I'll give you an example. All right, it's changed since then, but the school that I used to work at, what they used to do was when they would have a snow day, and since they're north of here, the chances of them having more snow, it happened a lot. So it was a day, I don't know, maybe a week before Christmas, and there was a really bad snow. And I was actually, when I got up in the morning, I was hoping there wouldn't be school because it took me a hell of a long time. I never had a snowblower in my life, so to shovel out my driveway. All right, so I went back in and looked on the website. There's a message up there, school canceled today due to weather, okay? Well, that day it actually got up to 30, a lot of the snow melted, etc., etc. But the bozo, who was the website person at the time, didn't take the message off. So it was on there the next day. All right, even though that it was like 30 degrees, the roads were fine, half of the people didn't come. All right, and that was on him. Okay, because he was both the copywriter and the editor. And it may not sound like a big thing. All right, they weren't as anal maybe as Rankin is about attendance. All right, but again, it was an important day and a lot of people missed, and it wasn't their fault. There were other people that called up and said, the weather isn't bad. They said, no, it's a mistake. And I let the guy know. I mean, I was coming in at 6 in the morning. I sent him an email right away. I said, Marshall, you better get this off of here. Yeah, and he did when he came in at 10:30 that day. All right, which didn't help a whole heck of a lot. All right, Content Manager does just that. And again, the copywriter and editor and Content Manager and even the graphic designer might be the same person. So the graphic designer, a lot of times they're people who have come in and they've got a degree in marketing with an MIS emphasis, or they have a degree in IS with a marketing emphasis type of thing. All right, there were people who came here last week. I think I told you that there was an open house for ITT students. And one of the people from Rankin, who was kind of giving tours and walking around, he sat there while we were in the conference room right down the hall here, and he was saying that he got his degree in marketing. He was going for a 4-year degree. I think he'd already gotten a 2-year degree. He was going for a 4-year degree, and they actually have a marketing with an MIS major, and that's what he was doing. So he was doing a lot of that stuff. Database. We're going to hit on databases again a year from now. Will you become a database expert? I don't think anyone is really a database expert. All right, but a DBA, it's an important job, a database administrator. Most of them, even people coming out of school, if you're lucky enough to be hired into a big company, that's a 6-figure salary. All right, so you can make a heck of a lot of money if you're a good DBA. The network administrator, again, that's more the people on the other side of the wall there. They're the people who go through there and they understand they're not help desk people, but they literally administer the network. So if it goes down, they're responsible for bringing it back up again. And then there's web developer and web designer. We talked about this. The web developer is the person who's going to, more often than not, is going to write the JavaScript. They're going to write the code to make the website interactive. The website designer might know a little HTML, but chances are they know a lot of CSS. All right, so they may be bootstrap experts, to be honest with you. All right. So they go through this. This is one way of showing what's referred to as the SDLC, or the Systems Development Lifecycle. All right, you have some kind of a feasibility study. So what you do is you figure out, okay, we want to do this. Is it worth doing? That's what you're doing. Is it feasible? All right. Then you come in and you say, yeah, it's feasible. Now, what a lot of companies do, and I've worked for companies that have done this, is they say, oh, yeah, there's a problem. This is how we're going to solve it. And they come up with a plan, and it might be a really good plan. The problem is, a lot of times, even if you come up with a really good plan, it doesn't work for whatever reason. So I've always said, because I used to teach classes in systems analysis and design, you come up with 3 plans. And I call them the Cadillac, the Buick, and the Volkswagen. The Cadillac is the most expensive, but it has the most features and the most functionality. All right, the Volkswagen is the cheapest. It has the least number of features, but it costs the least. And the Buick is a lot of times what you settle on. Why? Because management wants the Volkswagen, right? They want to spend as little as possible. All right, most of the grunt workers, people underneath management, they want the Cadillac because it's got the most done already for them. So a lot of times you settle on the Buick. So it's important to always have backup plans, is what I'm telling you. All right? All right, then you go and you actually write the design. So the analysis is a high-level document. The design is much more detailed. The first time I ever wrote a design document, all right, and this isn't meant to impress you, but I was just amazed. It had over 500 pages in it. Because what I had to do was, with the code that I was writing, I had to put every single test that I was going to run on the code. I had to put the test down, what the expected results were, and then I had to run the test and show the actual results. All right? All right. Then you go through implementation. It's kind of like when you think about it with a website. Okay, somebody comes up with this idea. They go and they talk to a bunch of other people about it. They say, yeah, that sounds good, so they start to create it. Well, when you implement it, typically you test and test and test, and then it'll go live. All right? And then when you're done, you know, no website, for example, is ever done. So you start to go into maintenance, where you start to tweak it and add different things, remove things, etc. All right. And they say that the website development cycle is like that, but it's a little bit bigger. All right, it's got a few more steps in it. So in other words, some of the steps in here are broken out into multiple steps. All right. And there are, it says there, what about other methodologies? There's other methodologies. There's other ways of doing things. All right. And good, bad, or indifferent, I've worked at places where management they take people in management and they have them go out on some retreat for a week and they try to sell them a product. All right. And they come back and they go, oh, we're going to do this new, we're going to do this, we're going to do JAD, Joint Application Development. It's the best thing ever. All right. And then the people underneath them, the project managers, are like, okay, this is going to fail. But they have to do it anyway because it's come down from management. Or this is going to be a really good idea and it's going to succeed. And it just depends. All right, they talk about conceptualization. When you conceptualize, you're thinking ahead. So it's like if I was going to start a new website today, and I'm going to show you, I have to run this by Evan, but I don't think there's going to be a problem with it. What we're going to actually be building, and then we're going to do this as a class later this week. I want to find a better image, so don't let the image bother you. But we're gonna build this. And this is in Bootstrap, and it's known as a landing page. All right, so it might be the first page on a site. And if you look, notice how when I put my mouse over them, they move a little bit. Plus, they're the color of Google Plus. They're the color of Facebook, the color of Twitter, and the color of Instagram type of an idea. All right, and I'm going to take it a little further. I'm going to show you some stuff. I'm actually going to give you the code, but I'm also going to show you. Okay, it's one thing to sit there and type in jpscott@rankin.edu and click there, and wow, what happened? Well, it went away. But it's another thing. I'm going to show you some PHP. You don't take any PHP here, but I'm going to show it to you where I'm going to use this machine as both a client and a server. And when I get done, it's going to come back. It's going to send stuff to the server and come back and give us a message. All right, just so you can see what typically happens, all right, rather than just sending it to the author's thing. So that what I've been trying to do is trying to come up with a better image than the one that's here, all right? All right, so they talk about, they break all these phases down, and they talk about analysis, and it's usually done by the higher-ups in the company. When I say higher-ups, I don't mean managers, but I mean like the project manager. I don't mean administrators. All right. They're going to decide whether or not it's feasible, and they're going to determine when you're coming in and analyzing, is this worth doing? If it's worth doing, how much is it going to cost us? If it's worth doing and it's going to cost this amount of money, they do what's called an ROI, or a return on investment. They want to make sure that if they're going to put out $1 million for something, that they're going to get some payback for it. All right. From there, you typically come in and you start to do the design. And again, it's important that there's a lot of documentation throughout this, especially if I'm an independent contractor and I'm working for Brady, but maybe he owns a company and he's contracting me. What I have to make sure of is that we have an agreement. This is what I'm going to do. I've had this happen before. I've had students who agree to go in and work on an internship for someone. And we have a written agreement. This is what they're going to do. They get it done, and the people like what they've done, and they go, oh, but we also wanted you to do this, 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 and this. No, I'm sorry. This student has got 100 hours that they're working on this internship for you. They've already put in more than 100, and now you want them to do other things. All right? All right. During production, you're putting the stuff together. This is when the website's coming together and you're starting to test it. All right? That bleeds right into testing. You've got all sorts of tests that you run, other people run, etc. All right? You have to test things, for example, like accessibility. Are you meeting standards? Is it usable? Then you launch it. All right? And after you launch it, then it's maintenance. And it's really important that while you're going through this, when you launch it, etc., that you want to find as many errors as you can. Does that make sense to everybody? As a developer, it's considered a success if you find an error because you found it before the site went live and someone else found it. You don't want that because then it looks amateurish and people might not want to go out to it. You know, one of the biggest reasons people will leave sites, and you all have seen this, are broken links. Oh, wow, this is exactly what I want. You click the page and it comes back out and you get a 404 error, file not found. You get miffed and you leave the site. That happens all the time. All right, and then it's also important that while you do this, you evaluate and you say what worked and what didn't work. All right, now there's a couple more things that are discussed in the chapter because literally, we're almost done. There's like about 4 more pages. I'm up to page 462 in the chapter. And they talk about domain names. All right? And it's funny, this may not sound like a big thing to you, but let's suppose for a second that I decided that I wanted my own website, all right? And I wanted it to be www.jeffreypaulscott.com. I can put that in there and hit enter. And if it comes back and it says it can't be reached, there's a pretty good chance that there's no one out there right now with that site name. Does that make sense to everybody? But there are people that literally troll the internet, and I'm not being funny here. And what they do is, it's not impossible right now that when I did that, somehow somebody knows that and is going in and looking to see if that name's available. If it is, they might buy it. They're called cyber squatters, and it happens. All right. It's just the same kind of thing that if somebody lets their website lapse, all right, they buy it from them. And if you've never heard of that before, then I don't know if you follow politics, but I found this funny because I've got a weird sense of humor that if you don't know, near the beginning of the political campaign, back when we still had, 15 or 16 Republicans running, Jeb Bush's website lapsed, and guess who bought it? Donald Trump. So when you went out to jebbush.com, it pushed you out to Donald Trump's website, which I found funny. All right? But things like that happen. All right? If there's someone right now who is thinking of running for president in 2020, and they haven't gone out and whoever it happens to be, okay? They probably, if they want their name.com, they've either bought it already or they should be. Okay. All right. So they give you some hints here on buying a domain name. I'm not going to go through this. These are guidelines. These are guidelines from the author of our book. What I'm saying is not everybody's going to agree with those guidelines. There are plenty of websites out there that have hyphens in them, for example, in the name, although that's considered bad practice. Okay, but people do it anyway. One thing that's not in here says describe your business, etc., etc. Typically, let's say, for example, that, I don't know, for some reason, and in fact, one of my students did this kind of as a joke when he was doing a project. He wanted to create a site that was similar to Amazon. He wasn't going to offer near the stuff, so he went out and checked, and sure enough, there was no one who had Amazon too. So he was going to call it Amazon too. Now, come on. Really, do you really think that he's going to succeed doing that? So just because someone has a website and they've got a name that's known, if you try to tag onto that, that's not typically a real good idea. But people do it anyway. When you do that, you have to register the domain name. You have to pay for it. And typically there's an initial charge. It might be anywhere from $5 to maybe $35, something like that. And once you do that, you typically then have bought that domain name for a year. So you'll get a message 1 to 2 months before it expires. It says, do you want to keep this? All right. And then they talk about web hosting, and they talk about different types of web hosting. And it's important that you at least hear these terms. All right. The first one there is called virtual web hosting. Okay. What this is right here, this web host, where they show that on the picture, what that means is somewhere, some company has got a machine that they're using as a web server. And although they make it look like a real big machine, it might look pretty much just like this. But it's super powered in that it's got a heck of a lot of memory in it. It's got a heck of a huge hard drive in it, etc. So it might be bigger, all right? But with virtual hosting, what happens is, it's kind of like, for lack of better words, it's like they take what's inside of there and they cut it up into pieces, and you get one of those pieces, all right? If you've ever gone out to a place like Bluehost.com, or I think there's one called Alligator.com, and there's a few other ones where you can get your own web hosting, you probably are virtual. You get a small, limited amount of room on somebody else's server. All right, and that works very well if you got a small site. You know, some people are happy with that forever. All right, dedicated hosting. That's when you own this whole machine. Think about, again, think about it to scale. Amazon. Amazon has what are called server farms. In other words, they've got probably hundreds, if not thousands, of these servers all over the world. Not all over the United States, all over the world. But they're dedicated. They don't want to share them with anybody else. Hell, they're Amazon. All right? So they give you some guidelines in here. You can read these yourselves, okay? But this is page 466. This is the end of the chapter. So most of the stuff that's in here, at least ideally, makes some sense to you. All right? So what I'll do, in fact, I'm going to start doing it right now, so I'll do a little bit of proactive. I'm going to create, based on the Chapter 10 test, I'm going to try to create, and by the end of the period, have the review sheet, even though you're not taking it till Friday. All right, that'll give you plenty of time to look through it. And like I said, we'll go through it Thursday. I think it makes the most sense to do it the day before the test. And if you say, well, why can't we go through it early? Well, you can always go through and try to answer the questions yourselves too. All right. So again, that's it for today. Okay, so today's the 19th. Tomorrow, hands-on all day. Tomorrow you will also be given your next assignment. And like I said, part of that next assignment, I'm going to run this by Evan, but I don't know why he'd have a problem with it, is we're going to do something like this. And it may not look like that big a thing. It's really not. But hopefully you can tell looking at it, it's also responsive. See how it shrunk down? And it's even responsive. I don't know how we do it in here. But if I were to take it and move it over so it would be in landscape as opposed to portrait orientation. It's going to give us a chance to bring together a lot of different stuff. My hope is Wednesday we're going to do this as a class, this project. I'm not going to give you the final project. We're going to do it as a class because it's going to be the first part of your 4-part assignment. We're going to do it together. All right? So I'll give you the files you need, but as far as putting them together, that's what we'll do as a class. And that might take quite a bit of the period to do that. But ideally, at least, it's going to bring together a lot of different stuff because it's only one HTML file. All right? There's the source. So it's not really all that big. All right? But not only is there the source, but there's also the style sheet. Okay? And it's actually, the style sheet is about as big as the source is. Okay, they're both about 100 lines. All right? So everybody understand what we'll be doing the rest of the week. So I'm going to quickly do for Chapter 10, I'm going to quickly do the review sheet. Then when I get done, I'll grade your test that you took earlier. I'll give them back. Those should both be done by the end of the period. All right? So the rest of the period is yours then.